What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Renaissance Technologist. Sorry it's taken me so long to record this second video, specifically about why the Google Cybersecurity Certification is amazing, awesome, and really got me off on the right foot. I am in the middle, so I made the decision of pursuing cybersecurity as a career, making that career change just about a year ago, sometime in March. So I'm in the middle of going through a bachelor's in cybersecurity from WGU, and also working through. I just completed not too long ago all of the material for the Security Blue Team Level 1 certification, which is something else that I'm going to be talking about. I'll make a video on that, just kind of showing my timeline and my trajectory to get here. So I'm pretty busy. I'm working through all these different things, and I'm going to share my experiences with you as to why I chose these different things that I'm doing. But before we dive in, I want to give you a little bit of a backstory. If you're new to the channel, the Renaissance Technologist is really all about bringing us back to a holistic style of existence where we integrate. When I say integrate, we actually, as human beings, we integrate the science, the arts, and philosophy into our daily lives, so that we live under kind of like a shared purpose of like physical, intellectual, and spiritual growth. That's something that I believe wholeheartedly has been missing, that we've been separated from deliberately. We'll get into that too. And that's preventing us from really, what they call like self-actualization, really becoming our best selves at the end of the day, because we are a spiritual being having a human experience, right? So we need to have all of our the three aspects of the human existence. We need to have our mind, our body, and our spirit in alignment, and each one has to be sharpened, and each one has to have its own level of rigor, its own kind of like testing ground, its own sharpening stone, if you will, to be able to start leveling up, and to be, at least at minimum, to be sharp. And so the Renaissance Technologist, this channel is going to be dedicated to really spreading that message and talking about what it takes, or what's been my experience with that kind of being the objective. What have I been doing? What's been my experience in trying to pursue that? Because that's something that can be pursued. It can only be pursued. It's a lifelong kind of endeavor. It's something that, like, the ancient Greeks and the ancient peoples, knew that it's not something that you're going to achieve per se. It's something that you pursue. It's a lifelong endeavor, and you kind of little by little you work towards that, so that you can become as close to it as possible in this existence. So I'm going to share like what's been my experience with that, and if it resonates with people, that's great. Beyond that part, I'm also here to help these older career changers and those people who are curious about cybersecurity in general to what would you say, to kind of get clarity, and share my story on how I got started. Like I said, I'm about a year in, and I'm really excited with my progress. And I think that if you commit yourself, you'll be able to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time, like I think I have. I've gotten the A+ certification, which is 2 tests. I've gotten the Network Plus Security certification. I've gotten the Security Plus certification. I got started with the Google Cybersecurity Professional certification, which was amazing, which I'm going to talk about in this video. It really helped to introduce myself to the foundational principles and actually, get wrist deep in the muck of what you really need to be able to know, what you need to be able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Dance with? I don't know. As a career, because you have a lot of technical tools, you have a lot of, you need a lot of physical theory. You have what is risk, what is asset inventory relating to, the digital space, the CIA triad, of course, I'm going to talk about in this video. But for those who are new to this channel, I also want to share that I'm not from technology. I come from a business background. I spent like over 10 years working in the business operations space for a financial services company. So I decided to, um, I just I decided to just jump off the cliff. I jumped off the cliff, and just waiting for the parachute to open, and I'm doing the work in order for that parachute to open. So specific to what the video is going to be about, we're going to go into some slides. I prepared some slides to go through. I don't think there's another video exists like this. Maybe there is. I tried to find it when I was trying to research the cybersecurity, Google Cybersecurity Certification. But this video that I prepared is going to break down each course, each module, and kind of give you an idea of what it actually talks about, what it prepares you for, what's the information that you're going to gain from it, what's the experience you're going to gain from it, so that you can make a better determination whether or not it's something that you want to pursue, whether cybersecurity is something that you might be interested, and then kind of gives you a head start. That's the word I was looking for. It'll give you a little bit of a head start so that when you do actually start the certification coursework, you'll have at least Charlie Burpee to thank a little bit, so that like when the words and the vocabulary hit you and the concepts hit you, you're like, oh, okay, he mentioned that in that video, and you kind of you'll know. You won't feel kind of blindsided. You'll have a little bit of a head start. So the Google Cybersecurity Certification for me was a huge milestone. It gave me clarity that I needed to demystify this cybersecurity. You know, when people talk about cybersecurity, it's kind of like for me personally, I felt like, you know, you were talking about rocket science or brain surgery or something like that. It felt kind of like out of reach for me. But the Google Cybersecurity Certification really made it feel attainable. It kind of demystified it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not easy, and in fact, it might have the opposite effect on you, perhaps, I don't know, because it might reveal to you that maybe this is something that you don't want to do, and that's fine. I mean, that's the life journey, that's the process. But I think that clarity is what we need and what we're looking for. You know, like I said before, you know, I tried a bunch of different things, and sometimes that's necessary in order to gain the clarity. There's no other way. That's kind of like the way the world works. That's how life is. You have to go through it. You have clarity through action, right? It doesn't come through. You can't think your way through these things. You have to kind of find out what it is that you like, what it is that you don't like, what it is that your brain is designed to do, and what it isn't. So, more to the point, if you're generally here wondering whether or not this Google Cybersecurity Professional Certification is right for you, whether you should invest your time in it, I'll just cut straight to the chase. In my opinion, it absolutely 100% is. In this video, I'll be breaking down everything you need to know about the certification. Like I mentioned before, we'll go over how it works, what you'll learn, and why it's the perfect starting point for anybody who is just getting into cybersecurity or is in the middle of a career change. And I'll share my personal experience and insights on what it's been like for me as a career changer who's in his 40s, diving into tech and cybersecurity for the first time, and you'll see what it's been like for me along the way. Like I said before, I'm in the middle of doing a bunch of different things. And I'll explain why I felt it was right for me to do it this way. It's only been a year. It's been less than a year. So I made the pivot to cybersecurity in about March, in the mid-March, like let's just say March 23rd of 2024. And right now it's February 11th of 2025. So it's been about 11 months, and I've covered a lot of ground thus far. Like I said, I've gotten. I started off with that Google Cybersecurity Professional Certification. It took me. I forget how long it took me. It took me about three months, just under 3 months, maybe 2 months to finish it. It's a lot of material. Like you're gonna see, it's a lot of material. It's good material. It's hands-on material. It's not just kind of like multiple choice stuff. They actually have sandbox environments that you actually go in there and you get your hands dirty with Linux. You get your hands dirty with learning how to maneuver Splunk, which is a SIEM. You get your hands dirty with writing a little bit of Python code for automation. You get your hands dirty with all of these different environments. You know, it's really, really cool. You get to program a little bit of a firewall. It's because that's what it is. Virtual machines are like that's the time that we live in. right now, where all of these tools are available through virtual environments, which is amazing. So you can, they can kind of create these labs for us, and we go in there and we play around and we get to learn, so that we can actually put on our resume that we have experience with these things, and we can, possibly list these labs as projects on our resumes. So I'll be sharing my personal experience and insights on why I decided to take that particular path, but I'm really happy with what I've been able to accomplish in the last 11 months. It's exactly how I wanted to feel. Obviously, I wish I would be hired by now, and I'm sure there's a couple of mental blocks in there because of not feeling good enough, not feeling ready enough. That's a real thing, right? And so I'm working on getting past that. But even if that's the case, there is no harm in actually doing the work. It's one thing is feeling that way and then not doing the things that will help you feel prepared. So I'm really happy with the things that I've learned and the courses that I've taken, and I am excited to share that with you guys. So without any further ado, let's hop into why the Google Cybersecurity Professional Certification is incredible. Let's get into the slide presentation that I came up with for describing the curriculum of the Google Cybersecurity Professional Certification, and more specifically why I think it's an amazing first step for career changers or anybody who are just getting into cybersecurity. All right, so here is the curriculum. Now, it's made up of 8 courses. I left off the 8th off of this one for space. The last course is actually it brings it all together in kind of like a job search module, which I'll talk about in my slide deck. I just left it off of the little table of contents here. But I wanted to quickly run through the different areas, the different courses, as they call it. Each one, I would probably call it a module, but they call them courses. So each one of the courses. So the first one is the Foundations of Cybersecurity. And I have here, it's a primer for those entering cybersecurity field. So what I would say here is that when I first got into cybersecurity, or when I first started thinking about cybersecurity, whenever I've heard of cybersecurity, I thought it was like rocket science, like brain surgery or something like that. But cybersecurity needs a little bit more unpacking, like a little bit more fair treatment. It's the way I kind of think about it is very much like what a security guard in an armed car has to kind of consider, right? Those logistical kind of issues. Specifically, what are you protecting? What are you transporting? What are the different requirements? What would you do differently in this situation compared to if you were protecting or transporting something else? In order for us to really understand cybersecurity, we have to try on a new kind of lens, and with that lens comes a new set of vocabulary that we need in order to properly think about security in general and digital security specifically. So this first course introduces us to that vocabulary, to those principles, to those foundational pillars that I will go into more specifically in the slide deck, but the important stuff to be able to think about this stuff a little bit differently, to kind of give vocabulary to this new field. The second course is managing security risks. So basically, for people who are familiar with just kind of the general business, it's risk management. And when we think about risk management, it's really about strategy. It's really about knowing the lay of the land, really understanding that anything worth protecting is worth planning for, right? So it's about, maybe we can fall into the trap of thinking that cybersecurity is wholly reactionary. This course helps us understand that a lot of cybersecurity is really preventative, again, just like risk management. So getting clear on what the vulnerabilities are, what the landscape is like, considering if it's a small business per se, or if it's a home situation, medium-sized businesses. It's really getting a handle on what the threats could be and the potential impact or the risks that are involved that may result from a threat exploiting a vulnerability. So that this is where we're introduced to the CISSP 8 security domains, which is critical because it could get kind of busy really fast, really hard to wrap your head around how to think about the different aspects that need to be secured, if that makes sense. So it'll be it'll be a little bit more clear once we get into the slides. Course number 3 is networks and network security. So what we have here is basically the infrastructure, the actual nuts and bolts. Digital communication. It's a very physical thing that happens. It's these electronic impulses that are created into bits and bytes. But basically, it's just zeros and ones, on and off. Is there an electrical current? Is there not an electrical current? Now it gets a little bit more complex than that, granted, but but my point here is that it's a very physical thing that needs a physical infrastructure to occur, to live in, to be able to transit over. So it's the stuff that we don't see. I pretty much compare it to plumbing. It's networks are the plumbing of the internet, and it requires tubes and couplings and pumps, just like plumbing does, but in the form of Ethernet cables and switches and routers to get all this information around. So understanding the physical side of IT is mandatory. There's no getting around it in cybersecurity. You can't just kind of theoretical. It's not just theoretical stuff with cybersecurity. If you don't have a handle on how the data gets around on physical hardware, then you're going to be very, very ill-equipped as a cybersecurity analyst. Course number 4 is dealing with Linux and SQL. So Linux is an open source software that is prevalent on most servers on the internet, from most servers, most computers, most network devices as well. Granted that if we come from the business world, we're pretty used to seeing Windows-driven operating systems, but I think it's fair to say that Linux, at minimum, has half of the market share of operating systems on the internet. So being able to, like it says here, navigate the Linux file systems, managing files with the command line, the bash shell, and then also being able to use SQL and databases, because a lot of these things, a lot of this data is going to be stored and we're going to have to access later. So being able to query the databases is very, very key. So it's a lot of practice. But one thing that's really cool about the certification is that this is very, very hands-on stuff. So the first couple of modules, right, the first couple of courses is theoretical, but here's when we kind of get into the nitty-gritty. Unfortunately, on course 3 with the networks, we don't get too hands-on with the network stuff. It's still theoretical on that side, and helping us understand the OSI model and the different components and how data flows to switches in a network and routers and that kind of thing, and the anatomy of a packet. But in here with the Linux and SQL, they provide us virtual environments for us to go and try things out and play with. So they give us a virtual machine, a Linux virtual machine, and they give us tasks and assignments to have us get our hands dirty with manipulating the Linux file system, creating directories, creating files, changing permissions on those directories and those files, and those kind of things, creating users and this kind of stuff like that. So there's a lot of practice here with both Linux and SQL, which is amazing. Now, granted, one caveat is that the command line is and can be very intimidating because of the syntax, and there's a lot of shorthand. It looks like like little
a dash A or a dash F, means so much, and a typo can really, really mess you up. Um, so there's endless potential for memorization needs there, but it grows on you when you realize how much faster using the command line is compared to using the GUI. So eventually you learn to love it, and that's what Google is there for. So if there's anything that there's a lot of cheat sheets out there that helps with uh, with with mastering the command line. I grew up in the DOS days, so I'll date myself. I'm 45 years old, so I remember playing Oregon Trail and where in the world is Carmen San Diego and these kind of things. And so the only way, everything was command line oriented. The back in the day, so it kind of brings back a little bit of memory. It's a love-hate relationship with that. Um, and so here we are, course number 5: assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. Understanding the assets we protect, the vulnerabilities that threaten those assets, and the mindsets of the attackers. Again, this is kind of reminds me a little bit about course. Reminds me of course number 2, where it kind of it extends the idea of really conceptualizing what an asset really is, and gives us more of the vocabulary and the scaffolding to how to think about what it is that we're protecting. Like I said, what are assets? What are the and what makes up an asset? What is an asset? From a digital perspective, all of the information that a company works with, the digital stuff are assets, but also the hardware itself are assets. So it kind of goes into a little bit of that stuff. It kind of helps us wrap our head around the vast details that are involved in organizing a systematic way to think about what protecting an asset really means, and allows the complexity of it all to be thinkable and actionable. So it's a really, really good course on that. And course number 6: sound the alarm, detection and response. Handling cybersecurity incidents, focusing on detection, analysis, and response to minimize the impact. Here is where the rubber meets the road, and we get into what the daily duties are for the SOC analyst. This is where we really get our hands dirty with detection and prevention with tools like Snort and Suricata. We also dive into a little bit deeper in data packet analysis with tools like Wireshark. It Remember how I mentioned in course number 3, we go into the anatomy of a packet. How data travels through the network up and down the OSI model. So we go once these packets are in flight, then we can use tools like the Wireshark to analyze. Think of it as an X-ray. We can take an X-ray into these packets and see what they contained. And the course rounds out with having us practice incident response and alert response with a SIEM, with a security incident and event management platform like Splunk. So basically, what they are is like so. So basically, what Splunk is, or any kind of SIEM, is we want our devices to constantly be reporting back to a central repository, let's say. And that central repository is going to keep an eye out for different type of behavior. And whether or not that behavior is an anomalous, meaning unexpected, or if we're explicit with the type of stuff that we want it to look out for, it'll create an alert. An alert could potentially become an incident if, in fact, that threat actor actually accomplishes their goal. Because, say, like, I don't want to go too much into the details here, but say there is a threat actor that's doing a port scan that's an alert. But if that port scan communicates back to the people and it sends back information, and maybe even ends up creating a backdoor or some sort of persistence, then that becomes an incident. All right, so an alert that actually accomplishes a particular goal becomes an incident, but that we'll get into a little bit more of that. So Splunk is a SIEM, which is a platform, which is why we need tools like Python and SQL and all these kind of programming languages, because if you can imagine, uh, every router, every switch, every machine is sending back logs, and a log is every time an event happens, like if a password is entered incorrectly, or if somebody asks for access for a service, or if a piece of information comes in from the outside, and it hits our web server, all of those. I mean, it's kind of hard to even explain, but every little action, for the most part, is going to create a log, and you can imagine it's just, I don't even know, like billions and quadrillions of lines, a vast amount of lines. So those those kind of logs are, let's say, normalized and collected and collated in these seams, and the seams leverage these commands, these logs, these queries, more specifically, to look out for things that we want it to, and alert us when it comes across it. So that's what a seam like Splunk does. And then finally, course 7 is we actually get our hands dirty with coding in Python. So it's a nice little intro to Python programming, to get us really going and comfortable with the idea that we're going to need Python to automate cybersecurity tasks, like I mentioned before, like log analysis, like vulnerability scanning, and traffic analysis. So this intro to Python course is basic. I don't know if you've ever taken a programming course, but it's kind of like basically introducing what a variable is, how to store information in a variable, um, how to code loops, what are logical and conditional statements, how to write kind of pretty fundamental code. Pretty much is a nice way to explain that. This is a nice little introduction to how to code in Python. And again, they gave us a virtual environment for us to do that. So let's jump into the first course, Foundations of Cybersecurity. All right. So here, like I mentioned before, it gives us a background of cybersecurity and its evolution. So we think about cybersecurity as a modern kind of phenomenon, but it evolved alongside the internet. In fact, the first computer virus is known as the Creeper, and that appeared in the 1970s. But it wasn't until the 1980s and the 1990s that we really saw a rise of like malicious attacks. That's when everybody started getting on the web. That's when personal computers became very popular, and people started getting online, and which allowed, which even made it make sense for people to start creating these viruses, because why would you have a virus if nobody's connected, right? So what kind of information? But once these computers started getting connected with the early versions of the internet, that's when it became a thing. So because of its popularity, because basically everything is, there's so many things connected to the internet now, this course really underscores how cybersecurity became a cornerstone of modern organizations, because with such interconnectivity, there's a lot of potential there's a lot of open doors for people to get access to information that that is that you don't want them to get access to. So it also talks about, the role of an entry-level cybersecurity analyst in this course, as the SOC analyst being the first line of defense, the person on the ground monitoring for suspicious activity, investigating breaches, and responding to incidents as they occur. So all kinds of organizations nowadays, every organization, all of the information, there's no paper and pencil anymore. So organizations need skilled professionals to keep their systems secure. And the really cool thing about this course is that throughout all 8 courses, they're always bringing on real world Google employees to talk about their journeys and how they got into IT and cybersecurity in specific. And most of them actually don't even have an IT background. They come from they're project managers, they've come from salespeople, they've come from HR. I forget the gamut, but there's most of them have non-IT backgrounds, and they made their way into cybersecurity. And so course one, like I mentioned before, gives us a good amount of grammar for the cybersecurity. Like I said, it introduces us to the foundational principles and frameworks of cybersecurity. Okay, so at the tippy top of that pyramid, everything from cybersecurity, you can arguably say, branches down from the concept of the CIA triad. That is the pillar. The CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality has to do with the protection of information against unauthorized access, meaning you only the idea is that you only want people who have authorization to see certain data to have access to that data. Integrity is that you protect the data so that it can't be manipulated when it's either in storage or in transit or on receipt. So integrity is protecting the ways that you are able to protect data from being manipulated at all. So you can prove that it is what it was when you first stored it. And then availability is making sure that that data is available when you need it. So what are the certain controls that you're putting in place so that when you want to access that data, nobody can prevent you from accessing that data, that you have that data when you need it. So that's the CIA triad, and that forms the foundational pillar of what cybersecurity is trying to accomplish, pretty much. That's ground level. Cybersecurity is really about promoting confidentiality, protecting integrity, and facilitating availability. And then so course number one, it gives us a little bit of a sneak peek into some of the tools. It talks and kind of like lists, what some of the SIEM systems are, with security, incident, and event management systems, what some of the intrusion detection and prevention systems are, what the concept of firewalls is, and what some of the network monitoring tools are. Now we move on to course number 2, which is manage security risks. Now, thinking about cybersecurity can be a little messy. Where do we start? What's involved? There's so many different aspects of a business that how do we start kind of systematizing? How do we start making this thing even neat in our mind so that we can actually think about that? One of the ways that this is done is through the help of the 8 CISSP security domains, the 8 security domains that was published by CISSP. And these are areas of focus for security professionals to protect data systems and networks. So these domains include, and this is, again, this helps us think about this in a very systematic, organized way, that now it stops being so abstract and it becomes, each one of these has kind of like a tree that springs out of it that gives us, that helps us be able to take action on the different things that we need to focus on, that helps us protect our organization, our data, our systems, our people. So you have the security and risk management domain, right? Like it's a kind of like a sub-universe. Asset security, security architecture and engineering, communications and network security, identity and access management, confidentiality, right? Access management, identity, that's users and stuff. Security operations, how to respond to these incidents, security assessment and testing, and software development security. Another helping hand that we have in course 2 is the concept of frameworks. Frameworks, again, just like the 8 security domains, help us think about, well, what aspects of a business, what aspects of reality, what aspects of the modern world, what aspects of whatever it is that we're doing and we're engaged in, what aspects need attention. Let's say, how do we think about it? How do we kind of how do we ring fence this kind of nebulous idea of business? What aspects of it do we really need to focus? What pieces of it need our attention from a cybersecurity? So that's what the 8 security domains help us do. Now, once we have that, so now what do we do with that, right? So now a framework like the NIST or the ISO 27001 or the CIS, these frameworks, they're like blueprints where they give us kind of rules and guidelines and standards for how to approach security within those different domains. Right? These are the different things that you should be paying attention to within the asset security domain, within the security operations center domain, within the communications and network security domain. So the frameworks help us do that. Then we have one layer down is the actual controls, which actually the frameworks help point us to. So the frameworks are like the guidelines and the standards, and then we can also find what are the controls, which act the actual tools and the processes that you put into place to protect the system. So are you going to put in a firewall block, or are you going to have a an employee training and awareness program? So these different controls come in three main types. You have the technical controls where you put in actually code into, say, like a firewall, right? You have an operational control, which is something like an acceptable use policy, or it deals really with the day-to-day execution of the tasks and processes, versus a managerial control, which could be something like mandatory vacations so that other people can have a chance to use the machine that you're on to see, possibly, not that they're going to go snooping, but in the things that you deal with on the day-to-day basis, if there's somebody doing something nefarious, some of that stuff might pan out, as to say. The course then goes on to talk about awareness of threats and vulnerabilities, basically introducing the ways to identify and assess a variety of different threats. So it introduces concepts of what phishing and social engineering is, what ransomware is, the insider threats, disgruntled employees, or even natural disasters that plays a part in safeguarding our data. So it helps us become familiar with common vulnerabilities, which is unpatched software. So if we don't upgrade our software to the latest versions, a lot of these latest versions are deployed as a response to a bug, a vulnerability that was identified, and therefore it needs to be patched. Another common vulnerability are weak passwords and unsecured networks, meaning we're going to go into this. You learn this in course number 3, but a computer, a device, has many open doors. They're called ports. Many different services, like the web services or communication with network machines, or FTP, how to upload files. They all have different ports, different doors. So sometimes by default these doors remain open. So if you don't close them, people can actually, threat actors can actually access your systems through these ports that are open. So it introduces us to those ideas. And then it also talks about getting us familiar, hands-on, with the SIEM and incident response technologies. So like I mentioned before, SIEM, security incident and event management systems, collect log data and detect anomalies, and then also generate alerts for analysts. And incident response playbooks are some things that a more mature or even any functional security operations center deploys playbooks, which are basically step-by-step guides for handling security incidents. So typically many of the incidents are similar to other incidents, or are common. So a very standard way of handling these incidents is by leveraging a playbook. So these are just ways of stepping through like a checklist kind of way of responding to these different incidents in line with specific protocol and procedures and incident management. The next course is networks and network security. Like I mentioned before, the plumbing of the internet, the plumbing of networks. So course number 3 is all about understanding the infrastructure of networks and the principles of secure data transmission, recognizing the vulnerabilities in the networks and implementing effective defensive, gaining hands-on experience with tools like firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and virtual private networks. So like I mentioned before in when we were going over the table of contents, this is what we know as the internet, and all the wireless technologies, even the cellular technologies. Is a very physical thing that we're dealing with. And the stuff that we don't see is just basically the tail end of it. It's the very tail end of getting the data that's flying around, cables and switches and routers, and these very physical infrastructure devices. the final end result is that we get a beam, right? We get a beam of a frequency. It's a radio frequency. I mean, to the extent that you want to consider that even physical, right? It's a radio frequency that's picked up by a receiver in our phones or in some sort of network interface card, some wireless network interface card in our computers. Um, so in this course, we go through the types of networks and the essential components. So we go over different types of networks, local area networks, wide area networks, wireless networks. We dive deep into that. What's the difference between a local area network versus a wide area network? Well, the wide area networks, for all intents and purposes, the WANs, wide area networks, is the internet. Local area networks, that can be broken down into a bunch of different things. That can be your home. It could, to a larger extent, it could be a university campus, or it can be a corporate office building. Um, to a larger extent, it could be a couple of corporate offices that are wired together. And that you go into the specifics into creating VLANs and all that kind of stuff like that. But then we get into the minutia and the different components of those types of networks. You got the things that make it happen: the tubing, the plumbing. You got the routers, the switches, the firewalls, the cabling, all the things that actually connect these wires together and allow the protocols to. There's routing protocols that are involved, right? How does one message get to another message? That's what IP addresses are for. We're very familiar with IP addresses. IP, Internet Protocol. So that's kind of like the address on your house. But then how does the package know to get from here to someplace in California? Well, it has to go through routers on its way there, and each router has its own way of reaching its final destination. These are called routing protocols. Different kind of, what would you say, procedures of algorithms to select the most efficient route to get to its final destination. And that's what the middle portion of course number 3 is all about: the different kind of communication protocols, the TCP/IP protocols, the backbone of the internet, HTTP, the hypertext transfer protocol, which is for web traffic, and the FTP file transfer protocols, for generally speaking, for uploading files to servers and that kind of stuff like that. This is a little bit. There are more modern options than FTP. So, for example, this is unsecured, so they have an FTP secure, but then they also have they're coming out with a different protocol in replacement for FTP in general. So the second piece, routing data packets. So the protocols, you think about those like those are standards, those are steps that need to happen. If you think about what a protocol is, I think about, it's funny, my way of thinking about protocols, it's like, because I'm Spanish, there's a protocolo. So like when you go see the king, like if you think about the Middle Ages, you have to be announced, and then you have to come, and then you remove your hat, and you have to bow. You have to make sure that you don't make eye contact with the king. Those are protocols. So these protocols, the packets in the different layers of the OSI model, and if you're talking about the TCP/IP, that's at the transfer layer. So it has to be. The packet needs to be set up in a certain way. It needs to follow certain guidelines. Same thing for the HTTP protocol. These are guidelines. The packets need to be built a certain way, and it needs to travel a certain way, and at each checkpoint different things must be checked. And it's looking for certain things. If the packet doesn't contain these certain things, or if it doesn't follow the same flow, then it's going to be dropped. So these are the different kind of protocols. And so routing data packets means how to get it to its final destination. So in this course, we explore the journey of the data packets, the role of the IP address, and the steps involved in the data delivery. So kind of the things that I explained up here, we get into the nitty gritty. It's pretty cool, to be honest with you. It's one of the things that got me really, really interested in pursuing cybersecurity, and really sure that I want to be involved in the infrastructure side, because it's the real side of the internet that actually that got me hooked. It's the tangible side. It's the predictable side. And then as it relates to cybersecurity, it's the vulnerabilities that exist in that transmission. So identifying risks in it, like man in the middle and data interception during the transmission, and how to safeguard against those vulnerabilities. And finally, in securing the network against intrusions. So the network protections involve things like firewalls, where you can block incoming or outgoing traffic based on IPs, but based on domains, these kinds of different things. The use of intrusion detection systems, we talked about that in the table of contents section, where we use intrusion detection systems like Suricata or Snort to monitor and flag suspicious activities. So this wouldn't prevent it; it would just raise an alert and let us know, oh, this unfamiliar activity is happening, based on some sort of rules that we that we implement. And then the system hardening. What we say system hardening is what we do, actual controls, actually things that we do, like closing down the ports, disabling certain services. System hardening that we do: disable unnecessary services. Here it goes. Disable unnecessary services to minimize attacks surfaces, enforce robust authentication policies, and make sure that we have regular updates, regular patches to outdated software. That's course number 3. Moving on to course number 4, the tools of the trade, Linux and SQL. So like I mentioned in the table of contents, Linux powers much of the internet. It's open source software. It's a lot of, when we hear about the Apache server, that's a Linux web server. Most web servers, I mean, you have Windows servers, of course, but the open source nature of Linux, and then the robust support from community members, community contributors, makes Linux a very, very cost efficient and viable technology, server technology all over the internet. And SQL is critical, because we're handling vast amount of data. So being able to query that data in an efficient way, we need more advanced methodologies than just like flat file kind of technology. So course number 4, it's a hands-on introduction to 2 vital tools in cybersecurity, Linux and SQL. Linux is the operating system behind a lot of the servers and network devices all over the internet. This course teaches the practical skills for managing systems, securing data, and investigating incidents. So in the introduction to Linux and its role in cybersecurity, like we mentioned before, it powers network monitoring, security auditing, and system admin tasks. The the command line interface, is a game changer for executing complex tasks quickly and efficiently. That is what we call the terminal in Mac OS, or the shell, right? So it's that black screen with white commands, and it feels like, you're back in like the 1950s version of computers, which it was. Everything was command line driven. I remember it being that way when I first got on a computer back in '88 and '89. The operating systems and their relationships to hardware and apps. This is when they talk about, because of Linux, it brings it actually. There's a part of the course that talks about the history of operating systems, which is pretty cool, where how it talks about the evolution from Unix, and how DOS was built on top of Unix and Windows was built on top of DOS, and it's really cool. And so in that history instruction, it explains to us how the operating system is the software that bridges the hardware and the software management system resources like memory, CPU, and so the operating system is what sits between the hardware and all the different things that we need to do with the computer. So the operating system manages communications for the storage device, the hard drive. It manages communications to the CPU, and manages communications to the RAM. So this course helps us understand how operating system level vulnerabilities can lead to attacks. Another portion of the course is navigating the Linux file system using bash commands, command line interface, the CLI. So bash and CLI are synonymous. So you learn how to, through in a virtual environment, right? Like I said, this is very hands-on. So they create a virtual environment for us, a sandbox environment, and they create a Linux machine for us. And we go in and we learn the Linux file system. We go in by creating, modifying, and deleting files, as well as adjusting permissions using the commands like chmod and chown. Change the owner and change the permissions. We automate, and we all practice. We talk about automating repetitive tasks. It gives us examples of how you can use bash scripts to automate repetitive commands as opposed to using the GUI, the graphic user interface, which improves efficiency and precision. And then we also get to play around in the sandbox, in the virtual environment, running SQL commands where we learn how to use where we filter information, we extract information from the database using the select command, and then we also are able to filter it, specifically select all files or select particular files where the user ID is blank or where the time was around before a particular time, or we're able to join different tables. So this SQL in general is key for analyzing data stored in relational databases, and we're going to have tons of that. And it helps us to filter. Specific information like failed login attempts, for example. So we filter that information using these search commands. Great. Moving on to course number 5: assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. So we understand. It helps us understand again. It's all this whole course helps us wrap our brains around the complexity, the vastness of what cybersecurity is. And in this case, right, what are we doing? We're protecting the assets. The assets is the digital information. So it helps us understand the assets that we're protecting and helps us understand the vulnerabilities that threaten them and the mindset of those attackers. So the course empowers learners with the skills to identify critical assets, map the attack surfaces, right, analyze vulnerabilities, and adopt a proactive security posture by thinking like a threat actor, which is pretty phenomenal. So it does all of that by step helping us identify and classify assets. So it gives us a structured approach to asset classification. So it helps us, it ensures focus on securing the most critical components of a network. So it helps us be able to compartmentalize it, think about it systematically, and then gives us a way of prioritization, understand the assets that are most important to a particular business. And it helps us to do this by, again, leveraging frameworks like the NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, I think that is. It's frameworks like the NIST framework simplifies decision making and standardized security measures. So it helps us understand, for example, like we were talking about the first bullet, what's a tangible asset versus an intangible asset. Okay, so these tangible assets tend to be physical things. Intangible assets tend to be intellectual property and that kind of stuff like that. Financial records, and that kind of thing. Mapping the attack surface. The attack surface encompasses all the potential entry points through which an unauthorized user may access an organization's system. So that's the attack surface. So it's the lay of the land, the landscape, the open doors, the holes in the fences, all these kind of places that attackers may access the information. That is the attack surface. So open network ports, outdated software, unprotected APIs, etc., are encompass the attack surface that may or may not give an attacker an opportunity to snoop around. The threat actor's mindset. So the course helped us understand an attacker's psychology, including their tactics, techniques, motivations, and helps preemptively mitigate risks. So there's a bunch of different categories for attackers. So you have the hacktivist. You have an hacktivist who's basically their whole mission is just to kind of promote an ideology. Then you have the criminal hackers that really don't have an ideology or a drum to bang or a particular political motivation. They're just doing it for a paycheck. They just want to be able to steal people's information and sell it on the dark web. Then you also have advanced persistent threat actors, which are countries. You have geopolitical hackers that want to do that are basically doing it as a form of warfare. So this section helps us categorize who these different kinds of actors are, because each category is going to have a different kind of mindset, and the tools and the techniques and the tactics and motivations that they're going to employ, including things like phishing and the different kinds of malware and the various web exploits they might deploy. And it also includes a practical real world case studies of these things. So in this course, we study high profile breaches that have happened in the past and the catastrophic consequences of poor cybersecurity hygiene. And so therefore, by going over these case studies, it helps to reinforce the importance of having proactive measures against these attacks. Course number 6, detection and response. So in this course called Sound the Alarm, Detection and Response, helps prepare us to handle cybersecurity incidents with structured, practical approach, emphasizes skills in detection, analysis, and response, which are essential in minimizing the impact of a security breach, which is going to be inevitable. This is one of the things that's very important to understand, is that breaches in cybersecurity are going to be inevitable. The best thing that we could do is be as prepared and up to date and proactive as possible, but with an eye on the fact that things are going to happen. So make sure that we have a good system in place to address the things when they come up. So the first thing that it does, it helps us again systematize these things. The first part of the course begins with the incident response lifecycle. Think of it as a mental model in how to step through or work through an incident, beginning with containment, which deals with isolating the affected system to prevent the spread to other machines. Once we've been able to contain it, we analyze, we investigate, we identify, and then we eradicate. So strategies to remove the malicious elements from the systems. Then once that malware or the particular indicator of compromise has been eradicated, then the recovery phase begins, which the steps that we restore normal operations and the vulnerabilities are fixed. And then just as important of all is the post-incident review, where we document the incidents to refine the response strategies and make sure that we take that experience and kind of like in a circular fashion, where we take what we've learned and we implement it in any kind of preventative strategies that we have in place, because as part of the risk management paradigm, we take whatever happened in the incident response lifecycle and pump it into our risk management strategy, so that we're making sure that we're up to date with all the potential harm that may take place. Next in the course is packet analysis and monitoring. This is another cool one where we get our hands dirty with using another tool called Wireshark. Like I mentioned in the table of contents, Wireshark is also known as a packet sniffer, a network analysis tool. So using tools like Wireshark helps us to analyze the data packets for anomalies. So we actually get to, almost like an X-ray into the data packets, we get to take a individual data packet, or you can imagine one communication stream between a laptop and a web server to pull down a website can go back and forth a bunch of times. So you pick one of those packets, and we can analyze it. By using Wireshark, we're able to detect signs of data exfiltration or unauthorized access, depending on what's being communicated. And in this course, we use a sandbox environment to develop filtering and inspection skills. So we actually go into Wireshark. We're given PCAP files that we're given these sample files so that we can do some practice analysis and answer some questions, and they kind of have us dig around and look for different things, and they present a scenario. We go through a background class, and it helps us understand the different filtering techniques and what to look out for, and then they kind of give us a bit of a bit of a test and a quiz to go fishing around for different potential. This is really fun, actually. It's really fun. It's a little complex, a little overwhelming, let me just say. Wireshark, there's so much you can do with it, and there's so many bells and whistles that it could be a little bit overwhelming, but just step by step, follow the guides, and just don't think about it too much. Just follow the steps, do what they tell you to do, and you won't become an expert by the time it's over. At first, when you see it, you're gonna feel like, I don't know what the hell this is. I don't know if I can make sense of it. But by the time you're done, you're gonna feel much more comfortable than when you started. I promise you. Next in this course, we move on to intrusion detection systems and network intrusion detection systems. So Snort and Suricata are devices, our software, actually open source software as well, to detect unauthorized access and malicious behavior. So it interprets predefined rules and analyzes logs to identify attack patterns, signatures, like brute force attacks. So it takes expected behavior or rules, meaning like explicit conditions, and analyzes those logs to see if it's something that goes counter to those rules. And finally, we have more hands-on time with the SIEM. So Splunk, the time that the virtual environment that they have in place uses Splunk. They mention Chronicle, they teach the Chronicle. I think that's Google's version, if I'm not mistaken, of a SIEM. But the environment is actually what we play with the most is Splunk. So we use Splunk to collect and centralize security events, right? So basically all of the logs from all of the different devices are normalized and sent into a SIEM, and the SIEM uses it to generate alerts for, like, say, a SOC operations center, so that we can, as analysts, we can see what we can see. The system helps us identify when there's something strange going on. So in this course, we learned to track IPs, link to threats, monitor user activity, and investigate incidents with the help of a SIEM, which is a security information management platform. It's basically like a log platform. If you think about it, it's kind of like analytics helps us visualize and organize all of the vast amount of information that's coming in from all these systems. Course number 7, automate cybersecurity tasks with Python. And like I mentioned before, it's an introductory course equipping us with introductory Python programming skills to automate critical cybersecurity tasks, leverage Python's simplicity and versatility to optimize the workflow. So it gives us an introduction, and it gives us examples of why we would even need Python in cybersecurity. So we'll be able to streamline the identifying of active devices and open ports. So it's going to help us also in log analysis, so we can rapidly identify anomalies in security logs. It helps us to manage the devices by executing repetitive administrative tasks via code, via Python. It would help us do some vulnerability scanning, because it actually has a built-in package, Nmap. So Nmap is a vulnerability scanner, a port scanner. That's port scanning is part of a vulnerability scanning. So automate vulnerability scans across networks. It would also help us do some network traffic analysis, so to detect anomalies in network traffic and detect it early. And Python, by its nature, has a vast array, a vast collection of different kinds of libraries, like Scapy and Nmap, Socket for task automation, just to name a few. It has pandas and all this kind of other stuff. In addition, it's very, very mathematically and scientifically oriented. It also allows us the opportunity to leverage APIs, application programming interfaces. APIs facilitate interaction with cybersecurity tools and platforms for data retrieval. So basically, APIs help us to access libraries that we can leverage from other service providers outside of our own system, so we can automate pulling health data from other systems. We can fetch security logs. We can also integrate third-party APIs like Firebase Tool, Showdown, and Seams. Don't recall what Showdown is, but helps us from we can write some code. We can write a program that actually pulls information out, and that's what APIs do. And by leveraging Python, helps us parse logs. So we can automate extraction of key insights from voluminous logs, helps us identify patterns such as failed login attempts, authorized access, and suspicious IP activity, and also leverages libraries like pandas and re for efficient data parsing. So there's an incredible amount of things that we can do with Python. And finally, like I mentioned, we also have a course on preparing for cybersecurity jobs. This is the final course, and it focuses on job readiness. It kind of brings it all together. It jumps into the job readiness part, but it kind of starts off by helping us understand the importance of communication. Once we've done all of our cybersecurity analysts digging, how are we going to communicate? How are we going to escalate that information up to our higher ups? So it helps us with different kind of templates and communication philosophies, let's just say, how to categorize incidents based on severity, type, and impact. Also helps us develop strategies for prioritizing responses according to the criticality of the incidents. It helps us with incident escalation, so it introduces some best practices for escalating issues to senior analysts, managers, etc., when and how to escalate incidents for timely and effective resolution. It also has a section about communicating incident details clearly during escalation. So we run the risk of, as cybersecurity analysts, dealing with so much information, writing reports. The section is going to be really about writing reports, writing incident response reports that either can have too much information or it can have too little information. And depending on your audience as well, it could be too technical or it can't be technical enough. So this section helps us focus on efficient communication depending on our audience. As it mentioned here, communication with stakeholders, collaborate effectively with internal IT teams, network administrators, and management, but also handle communications with external vendors, regulatory bodies, or customers professionally. And finally, the course rounds out with job search strategies, which I thought was pretty cool. The focus here, it kind of gives you the standard fare of, make sure that you have a good resume. These are some tips and tricks on what to include on an effective resume, tailoring a resume, developing strategies to prepare for technical and behavioral interview questions, of course. But I think the best thing, the thing that I'm going to be focusing on, which is kind of one of the purpose of me putting together this whole video, this presentation, is making sure you build a professional presence by using platforms like LinkedIn, GitHub, and personal portfolios to showcase your expertise. The branding is going to be the most important part. So learning all of the cybersecurity things is one thing, but for me particularly, I'm going to be focusing on building labs and projects in virtual environments. There's so many tools that you can use, that you can practice the things that you're learning and actually implement networks and securing networks and opening them up to the internet in a virtual environment with different kind of cloud providers. If Cisco also has the Cisco Packet Tracer, where you can build virtual networks and practice building networks and implementing routing protocols and all these different things. So I think building the professional presence is a really good, is the key takeaway for me, in my personal opinion, from this section. That was really, really good. And so that wraps it up. Those are all the 8 courses. So what is my conclusion? My conclusion is that you can do it. And this course is amazing. If you're just getting into cybersecurity, then this course is a must do. You must do it. There's no other course out there on the internet that does such an effective job, such a well-rounded job in presenting the theory, but also a lot of valuable hands-on experience, hands-on doing, that you can, in fact, not only just continue practicing, expand on it, but you can actually include this, like we said before, building a professional presence. You can include it in your personal portfolio, to and leverage it. You know, put it on your personal website, leverage it, point to it on your resume. So, really, really, really endorse this course. If for anybody who's thinking about getting into cybersecurity, this is the best place to start. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to do a piecemeal from different sources all over the web, and you're not really going to. So, how much do you know? It's such a This is the structure provided here is incredible, and apart from, it's a good starting point. What I would say is you wouldn't end here, and I'll share this, and I'll share this tidbit. So once I finished the Google Cybersecurity certification, once I achieved this, I ended up signing up to WGU for a bachelor's in cybersecurity, as well as doing the Security Blue Team Level 1 certification, which I just completed now, and I'm getting prepared for the 24-hour exam that's coming up. So, but but be, I had no experience with IT or cybersecurity prior to the Google Cybersecurity certification. And so I encourage anybody who's just getting started, this is a good starting point. Is it the end all be all? It could be for some people. I'm not really sure. I can't say. It wasn't for me, but it was exactly what I needed to get started, to give me the confidence to be able to say, okay, this is the career that I want to be in. I know that I can do it. It took me a lot of work. It's not easy. It took me a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of dedication to complete, to go through the labs, to do the hands-on experience, to actually ingest and process the theory. But then it gave me the confidence to say, okay, I feel good enough to be able to say I could do a bachelor's in this. And then once you get to the bachelor's, like in my case, once I got to the WGU, it wasn't so foreign to me, right? So it really helped me maintain my confidence all the way through. So with that being said, good luck. I will be releasing more videos on my journey. My next one is going to be my experience with the A plus certifications, the Network plus certifications, the Security plus certifications, which I obtained thanks to WGU, whose bachelors include these CompTIA certifications. So with that, I'll sign off and wish you all the best. Remember, you can do it, and look forward to seeing you guys again in the next one.